evening, folks. We're back again, believe it or not, despite our difficulties with things like technology and things of that nature. They can't stop us. We're determined to be with you tonight, and we are. And might make a few homemade MacGyver moves, but we're here. And not only are we here, but I wish I had the right adjective to describe David. I thought about sardonic, but I wasn't sure what that meant. So anyway, the whimsical David Whitley, not the English writer, the good old Southern sports writer, joins us tonight. And we got our old friend Graham Hall back to talk about what's going on in the world of sports. Looking for a warm, fuzzy headline of some kind. I don't know, they're hard to find. But a few little good stories, including one about the basketball team. And Loren Meadows will be here as well tonight. It's always good on the Buddy Martin Show with these kind of people. And good evening to everybody out there checking in. Dan Bond, David Baldoff, our records. Come join us. Ask some questions. Provide some commentary. Let's have some fun right here tonight on the Buddy Martin Show. Now on the air. Tell your friends and neighbors.
It's time again for Buddy Martin. Call him up and tell him what you're thinking. But be kind because he's doing the best he can.
Better, stronger, faster.
Mama says that alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush.
Hey, what if the voice calls while you're gone?
Take a message.
Bye.
You ready, champ?
I'm ready for this my whole life.
I'm incapable of small talk. But that's why you love me, right?
Kind of intimidating to be in the presence of so many great athletes.
Hello out there in Birdland or Gatorville, what do you want to call it tonight? Buddy Martin, the program heard 4 or 5 times a week here I hear, and hope you'll join us every night on the program. We're sometimes on other stations with other people, but glad to have you, our family, right here tonight. And speaking of our family, here's a regular every Tuesday night. Wasn't there a movie called If It's Tuesday, It Must Be Belgium? I think we got one that says, if it's Tuesday, it must be David Whitley. And here's David. What's up, Whit? How you doing?
I'm fine. I'm probably not doing as well as Belgium, though.
I don't know about that. Might be doing better.
I gotta be honest. I couldn't find Belgium on a map.
No?
I don't know how many people could.
Well, I wonder, is it over there close to Germany someplace?
Yeah, it's in Western Europe. It's not, well, somewhere Central Europe, I'm pretty sure. I think it still exists. Like some of those countries, like I bought a car once from a country that was no longer, on the map. A little Eastern European type of thing.
That does
they tend to change the borders quite a bit.
Yeah, that's not a good sign when the country the car is from is gone. Not looking good there. How are you, David? You doing all right?
I'm doing good. Yeah. Everything's good. I wish I had a shirt that said "Buddy" on it, like you do. Personalized stuff, huh?
Oh,
like
I forgot.
Polo, Ralph Lauren.
No, it was just one that was actually clean today. I don't know. I think it's clean. Maybe it's not. It's about 10 years old. But anyway, yeah. I'll get you one if you want one that says Buddy. If you'll give me one that says David, we'll trade shirts. Like they do athletes, they trade jerseys. We'll trade shirts, okay?
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, maybe we could trade computers after games, like in the old days.
Or something. Well, you're always fun to be with because you never take yourself quite too seriously. I went back and looked about your old tweets. Some of them are classics. Have fun with it. That's the thing about sports that sometimes I think we get lost on. My gosh, what's happened to this world? I look up here and I see David Baldoff saying, can we talk some golf? All we used to get was people whining. Why are you guys talking about golf? Talk about golf. David Baldoff wants to talk golf. All right, we'll talk some golf. Whatever you all want tonight, we'll try to please. But anyway, back to the idea that fun is, you do things for fun and they're entertaining. And one thing about it, when you're young and you're covering a team, you don't know any better, you're having fun. They're thinking, hey, look, they're paying me, David. They're paying me to go watch this game. It's great fun, right? Remember those days?
Oh yeah, I was that way for probably longer than I should. I've been sitting there and sometimes, like, I remember sitting at the like the 2012 Olympics in the 100-meter dash, and there were, I knew the whole world was staring at this thing. I looked up the camera. There must have been 10,000 cameras, and everything's hosting us. And I said, "Wow, this is why. What am I doing here?" I mean, people would pay tens of thousands of dollars to be sitting in my season. I never wanted to take for granted how lucky I was to be at a lot of these events that I've attended over the years, and a lot of great memories. A lot of them. Heck, at Florida Field, there's been some. I'm just you try not to be a fan about or look at it too much as a fan's perspective, but sometimes you get caught up in it and say, this is just quite an event just to be at, just to soak it in.
Inspirational sometimes. Sometimes when you go to those events, just the atmosphere gets you charged up alone.
Yeah.
Because you're in this arena. It's magical, it's historical. And places like the Olympics tend to inspire those stories. We're always looking for inspirational stories or funny stories or sometimes stories about abject failure, which we have in sports too. And who was it that said, was it Justice Black who said he loved the sports pages because it was so clearly defined who won, who lost? I believe somebody like David Whitley. David Kennedy used to quote him all the time on that. But, it is not that way anymore. There's a whole bunch of gray now in the arena. And if you can kind of just sort of ignore it for a minute and get into the good stuff, there are some great stories out there that pop up from time to time. They are inspirational. All right. Speaking of which, I think, by the way, Caglione hit a home run today, his first one. Apparently, no doubt on the right. He broke the record last year at 33, so he's off and running. Cag's trying to have another great year in baseball. We'll catch up with that in a couple of weeks. We're right now into basketball. And I wanted to talk to you tonight about a subject, and our listeners. Does it really matter who calls an event? When someone is calling an event that's an announcer, does it give you a feeling of more importance? And I bring that up for a reason tonight, because one of the guys I think has been one of the greats of all time, in my opinion, is a friend of mine, Franz, is calling it quits this year. He's going to do his last Masters, 40th Masters coming up on CBS. So there are some voices that are identifiable with events, right?
Oh, yeah.
You just know the voice. And I think Vern Lundquist has pretty well become one of those people at the Masters with all the, yes, sir, and all those calls about Tiger on 16. So Vern has announced this will be his last. And those Georgia Pines will forever ring with that classic, yes, sir. He had great pipes, and he's also a kind man, a guy I like very much. I thought he did a really good job on college football, but people started getting on to him when he got older and couldn't remember every name. But what is your opinion of Lundquist, and what's your opinion of announcers enhancing an event?
I was the first guy that really stood out to me, and everybody who was in that era, was Howard Cosell, of course, who you knew if he was on an event that it would be worth listening to because of just Howard. Now, he was probably the most hated man in America because he was just so acerbic and he didn't and a lot of it was I think his relationship with Muhammad Ali. People, back then Muhammad Ali was the most polarizing figure in America. And of course, Cosell gave him a platform, but whatever it was, I mean, this is the guy who ended up getting his own variety show. I remember, like Saturday Night with Howard Cosell.
Yeah, he did. That's right.
Yeah, and his use of the language, well, it fascinated me, and I just found he was in a way it shouldn't happen, but he was bigger than the event a lot of times, and that's what real announcers don't want to be that. But he did, no doubt. He may have had the largest ego in the history of sports broadcasting.
No doubt about it.
Which is saying a lot.
It is.
Hearing him, and then you shifted into next I think of is the duo. Summerall and Madden. When they were doing a game, it was and Madden, of course, has become this mythical figure because of the EA game. And it's crazy to think that probably anybody under 40 probably they think Madden is just the video game guy. They may remember him as an announcer, but the thing. Oh, he was a coach too. Yeah, he was a coach.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, but I mean, he definitely found his calling behind the microphone.
He did.
And it just came so naturally to him and all that. And that's the thing about it that I like with Vern Lundquist. You get the feeling he's at ease and he's just himself out there. Yeah. He's not trying to impress anybody. He doesn't have to, but he never. But he was just at ease. And so many times you feel like I think that some broadcast announcers are trying too hard, to make an imprint and to come up with something. But it's the guys who are just comfortable in their own skin and just let it flow. Like Tony Romo was good from day one because he let it flow. Now he's caught some grief lately, and I mean he's not perfect, but he just is at ease behind the microphone, And that's it's going to be interesting this coming year. One guy who has more pressure than maybe anybody in the NFL is going to be Tom Brady, because he's suddenly handed the number one job there at Fox.
Yeah,
and he's never done a game. Yeah, and he's never failed at anything. When you're Tom, where do you have to go? I mean, if he's not great from day one, people are going to say, "Oh, I don't know about this."
Yeah,
but he blew it. So
that's going to the bank. Yeah. Good points. Summerall was a friend of mine, and I knew him because he was from Lake City, and had a chance to visit with him a few times. And then when I went to CBS, he was on the road with John Madden, and I also Pat in Augusta. Pat was an interesting guy until he got into too much of the great later in his career.
Yeah,
he was I think he might have majored in Russian. At the University of Arkansas. Smart guy. And a minimalist. You remember the Ray Scott calls and the Packers.
Right.
Horning, touchdown. That's all he said. And and I know Pat loved that style. And he used as few words as possible. And he did a wonderful job of covering the Masters, calling the Masters, and calling, as you said, with John Madden and football. So, a lot of times we don't get to see it. We don't get to see and hear these guys because we're covering the game in the press box. And sometimes we tape it and sometimes we don't. But I do like certain people, and particularly, baseball and radio, that's another marriage we'll talk about, which is a whole different animal. But, when you grow up on that, you love it, and you go back to it occasionally. Every now and then I'll listen to a Rays game on the radio just to get a little radio every now and then. Something about radio that's a little more friendly. I don't know. I'm going to miss Vern. I guess one thing is we get feeling older because some of the people we know are disappearing. You're thinking, well, I sure miss that voice and miss his voice. But it marches on. On the other hand, Romo is one of the bright figures. Who else do you really enjoy calling a game or doing the color?
You're right, because these days, you don't hear it like you used to. I mean, I've covered so many games that you got to go out of your way to listen. He doesn't do anything anymore. But Costas has always been great. Especially doing baseball. To tell the truth, sometimes on Sundays, football, I don't turn it on. With the NFL, and I just let it go. I mean, Jim Nance is Jim Nance for a reason. He's sort of like the summer. You can plug him into anything, and he knows how to do it, and he doesn't overwhelm. Like you said about Summerall, the minimalist, and that is the sign. Like that when you think of Vin Scully, in the great call.
Well, I mean, there's nobody better in baseball than him.
Yeah,
and I'd say when I went
himself,
probably if you interrupted,
out as if you were a fan, and it's funny because at the Super Bowl, this past year when they had the winning touchdown, Romo kept talking and blabbering, and I think, I said, just let the moment play out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was one where he sort of stepped on his tongue, I think. but and it's too bad because people really got on for that. And I don't think he had a great game. And it's funny how people were reviewing the Super Bowl announcers probably had more critical eyes on them and people grading them than they did the actual players on the game. Yeah. But I guess that's what happens when you have 132 million people watching. I know if I had 132 million people listening to what I said, I'd probably start talking Chinese.
In your life, as Vern would say, right? In your life. Yeah, for sure.
It's hard to fathom that, really, 4 out of every 10 Americans are listening to what's coming out of your mouth at that point.
For sure. Speaking of which, let's do this real fast. Let's hear from our friends at Meldon Law. And Graham Hall hadn't been on in a while. He's standing by in the orange and blue room. He'll join us next right here on the Buddy Martin Show. Jeffrey Meldon. Jeffrey, you do a show where you ask a lot of questions. I've got one for you right now, okay, regarding how do you know whether your case is being handled right and what to do about it. In medicine, you can get a second opinion if you're not satisfied with the doctor's opinion that they have. And do you have that in law? Can you do that with lawyers?
Yeah, buddy. As a matter of fact, we get quite a few calls from folks that have signed up, particularly with the big box law firms that they do a hell of a good job of putting ads on TV. But after that, they don't really measure up to the way we try to create a client experience that's outstanding. And we're always willing to review a case and give a second opinion, just like with a doctor, because not all law firms are created equal.
I guess that's the normal thing. Just go to Meldon Law, Google it, and find out, and just give them a call. And like you say, if you come in, you get to see a Meldon. You don't get shuffled off to somebody else. You get to see a Meldon, and that's good to know because a lot of people don't know how to do that stuff, like me. And maybe you can coach us through. So Meldon Law, they won't back down. They will take your questions about your case if you have a question.
Yes, whether it's a new.
All right, thank you very much, Meldon Law. We won't back down. There's a guy who won't back down. He's relentless. He's one of the better journalists we've got in not our generation, but our time. A guy who still knows how to pick it, as they say. Does a terrific job at 247 Sports. Our buddy Graham Hall. Graham, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, buddy, how you doing? David, good seeing you, man.
Always good to see you. And I got to say, not only is he the finest reporter on the beat, always got the best hair. It just goes without saying.
Yeah. I'm kind of tired of hearing his hair compliments, to be honest with you.
Man,
I've been hearing him now for about 10 years.
The way he's got a halo tonight with the backlighting. Man.
Yeah, he does.
Well, you were having me on when I was still bald, so I appreciate you sticking with me before I grew it out and found the locks.
You're not on for you're on for what's inside your brain, not outside.
There you go.
Likewise, my man.
Hey, big guy, we're talking about sort of nonsensical things on our mind today. Really mostly about broadcasting for some reason and who we like and whether or not a broadcaster can enhance an event. Obviously there's some people that you hear their voice, you think about a certain event, etc. But what I want to dig deep with you on, unless you want to make a comment about it, particularly on a broadcaster, dig deep with you on two things is this basketball team, man. All of a sudden they're coming really fun to watch. They got some, I won't say elite players, but they're getting to be elite, and they may go to the Elite Eight. And people keep raving about their backcourt, which they should. I'm kind of impressed by their bigs, the way they handle when they go to the rack and how they pass the basketball. Really, and they're young and aggressive. But this team is really becoming fun to watch. And now has a shot at making a little bit of noise in the spring in March Madness. Give me your take. I know you're a big basketball guy. You follow it and you write about it. What's your feeling about what this basketball team is right now?
Well, I'll quote Mark Wise real quick because he's a smarter man than I am. And the goal every single year is make the tournament, figure out the game in front of you. That's all you can do, right? We've seen in the last couple of years a 1 seed lose in the first round. We've seen, as everyone knows in Florida Nation, you've seen 9, 8 seeds make it to the Final Four. Just worry about making the tournament. That's all you can do. And in this era of post-COVID college basketball with the transfer portal, I have argued time and time again that there has never been more parity across the Power 5 conferences, really Power 6 in basketball. And if you can be one of those top 30 of 363 Division I teams, you are doing a heck of a lot right. And this team is obviously doing a lot right. You mentioned the front court, the combination of the freshmen in Alex Condon and Thomas Haugh, who have just been very critical for this team, two of the top 8 players in the rotation. They had 27 points combined the other night against Georgia on the road. Obviously, Tyrese Samuel coming over from Seton Hall has been massive. Micah Hanlogton, another underclassman who was one of the top shot-blocking freshmen in the nation last year at Marshall, who played a very similar offensive style than this Florida team did last year, which has allowed him to translate well to the SEC. And then, finding Zion Pullen, I am kind of shocked that Zion is not getting the national recognition that I think he deserves. He comes into tomorrow night's game against Alabama, the top offense in the nation, in my opinion, and by a lot of metrics, obviously, so not a hot take, as the best guard in the SEC when it comes to assist-to-turnover ratio. He has been instrumental in this Florida team so far. Really, if they're without him for the first 3 games of the season, if he's available, they beat Virginia in my mind, and we're talking about a team that's sitting here at 19-6 right now, which I just got done watching Tennessee beat Missouri on the road by 5, a Missouri team that hasn't won in the SEC. But Tennessee is sitting here at 19-6 as well, and they're the number 5 team in the nation. So that should tell you how close this team is to being one of the top 20, top 15 teams in the nation. They're really 1-2 wins away, in my mind, from being one of the best teams in the nation. And, you get Riley Kugel coming off the bench along with the freshmen. That's a better second unit rotation than I think a lot of other teams in the nation have. This is a really, really good put together team. And I've kind of said the entire time, the key for them was avoiding a critical injury, which I know people have had their critiques about Mike White, and a lot of them are fair, but he did suffer a lot of unfortunate injuries down the stretch when you got into February, late January, that killed those teams' chances of making the tournament. If this team stays healthy, which they have done so far, knock on wood, obviously, they have a chance to beat anyone. And if they can get into March with this unit, they're going to be a tough out in March Madness. And like I said, you just got to handle the game in front of you no matter what seed you are. And this team is already poised to be a 5 or 6 seed at the current rate that they are.
David, they always talk about how important guards are in March. And we know Florida's got 2 really good ones, veterans who can handle and shoot, and hopefully shoot foul shots. That's the key in the March Madness, because they're going to foul you at the end. What is your take on that? Do you think these 2 guys are legit big-time players? And do you think this is the part that these guys can carry this team to maybe an Elite 8 status?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to figure out Zion Pullen, just the impact he's had on this team. I mean, he is the glue that holds them together. And I didn't know much about, he came in from California and figured, I am surprised how good the guy is and how he has turned out to be. As Graham mentioned, if he'd been to those first 3 games, they would have had a much better chance to win. But at the time, you figured, well, we don't know what he's about, but he has been this just a rock out there, and getting when you heard a little bit more about when they got signed Walter Clayton, because it was like down to them or St. John's and all that. And boy, isn't he glad he didn't go to St. John's now? Because
right.
God knows, Rick Pitino would have. I don't know what Rick Pitino would have said about him the other day after they lost. Yeah.
Rick said today he wasn't being critical.
Yeah, no.
He got it all wrong.
They have no talent. Okay. I think Rick's age is showing just a little bit. But so I'm sure Walter's glad he's here, just on that aspect of it. But yeah, between those 2 guys, and as Gray mentioned, you bring in Riley Kugel, who he's the wild card here.
I love Riley Kugel, Graham. I love him. I know he's a wild horse. I know but whenever he's on, he has flashes of brilliance. He looks like a big time player. I know he's not consistent. He went through a terrible shooting slump, but he can jump out of the gym. When he's hitting threes, guy can score from both ends, and he plays these. The biggest thing is he's a great defender, Graham.
Yeah, and we talk about him often as if he's a senior 5th-year guy. You got to remember this guy just turned 20 years old, missed the first summer of his freshman season, has been on campus in Gainesville for 18 months, and obviously being preseason all SEC, people are going to be expecting him to be this 15-point-a-night scorer every single night, but that's not the way it's going to be more often than not in college basketball. And if you go back to what Todd Golden said in preseason camp, he kind of let everyone know that this is going to be a team where 5, 6 guys, depending on the night, depending on the opposition, how they're defending them. Any one of these guys could be a leading scorer for this team. And they've had, all 6 of them in one game or another lead Florida in scoring. Zion Pullen has been the most consistent, but Riley Kugel has obviously had his nights where he's gone for 20, 15 points a game. When he's coming off the bench, he's going to more often than not be one of the most talented, if not the most talented guy on the floor. And that's going to make a difference for Florida when they have to go into their bench, when they have to bring someone off due to foul trouble or fatigue due to the pace of play that they play at. He's going to be able to take advantage of those matchups. And I think that it's a little bit more conducive to him right now in his career. The real key for me for him is him improving when it comes to late game scenarios, because you still have seen some undesirable turnovers, some kind of unwise decisions, I think you could call it, when it's a close contest where they're going to choose to sit him down the stretch in some games and go with those upperclassmen guards and Walter Clayton, who I think, of the backcourt, like I said about Zion Pullen, I'm surprised that he's not getting a lot of national recognition, but Walter Clayton is considered right now to be probably the most draftable prospect on Florida's roster. Obviously, Will Richard can go off for 20 points on any given night, depending on if his shot is falling or not. And, we've talked about the upperclassmen and what they can provide on any, given night for Florida. They're capable, Tyrese Samuel is able to give you a double-double on any given night. And Micah Handlogton, his defensive, I think, presence doesn't show up too much on the box score, but when you watch him, how he's able to take the opposition out of the game, clearly a difference maker for Florida at times. But this is a unit that bringing Riley Kugel off the bench is a luxury for them. And it really makes them a lot better in my mind, and give him a lot of credit. As much as he's got some criticism, I think people should give him more credit for how he's embraced the bench role. I know a lot has been made about his body language and things of that manner, but if you watch him in game, he is locked in. He's eager to do what he can for the team on any given night, whether he's playing 15 minutes or 30 minutes a game. This is someone who, a sophomore, like I said, you should give a lot of credit to for him dealing with the pressure, dealing with the role change, and still being able to consistently bring it a level of energy every single night that the defense has to account for. This is a really good team in my mind. And I got to be honest, I have to eat a little bit of crow, because I told people before the season that I wasn't expecting much improvement from last year's 16-17 finish, and I'm already wrong.
Well, you, David, you can jump in on this too, and Graham, they've won 8 out of 10. Is there a surge can you feel the fans starting to get let up a little bit here? Or are they waiting to see what the team's going to be? It seems like they're only a couple of really big wins away from really setting it on fire. And they got Alabama tomorrow night, which is going to be a tough game for them. Where on the popularity meter in terms of Florida sports right now, where is this basketball team, David? And how much are people talking about them at the coffee shops and the campus in Florida?
More than I thought more than the last couple of years, because there's something worth talking about. Because it's not, Graham was rolling off all these names, and the thing is, you can throw out 6, 7, 8 names that contribute. I mean, last year, basically, the conversation began and ended with Colin Castleton, and like I said, when he went down, the season went down. But now, one injury shouldn't sink them. Certainly would hurt to lose a guy like Zion Pullen or something like that. But, they have options this year and they have depth. But it is becoming a thing. I mean, the last couple of games, especially that Auburn game here, I won't say it harkened back to, the glory days of Billy, but, there was some real atmosphere in there. And, if they keep this up, gosh, I don't think they'll win tomorrow night, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me if they did. Nothing this team does surprises me. I don't think it should at any point, because they're so capable of doing this stuff. Then, they're selling out, and people are starting to talk about it. And we always say, well, it's a good thing they're playing well, because they have been talking. The football team hadn't given anything to talk about. But I think even if the football team was good, people are now going to start. They're talking about this basketball team, and it's a fun watch too. I mean, the way they just. It's always good when you're in every game, and they are in every. In fact, that's the one flaw about it. They are ahead in every game. then it becomes a little too exciting. But I think Todd mentioned it today. That the one game they've really played well was the Auburn game, where they got up 29, and even though they were 0 for 14 the last 10 minutes, they still won by 14, 15 points. So that shows you just what they're capable of. So tomorrow night it would shock me if they won by 15 or if they lost by 15. Just Bama's capable of going off like that.
Yeah, a lot of stuff happening. Let's shift our focus over to the other money sport revenue, if we can kind of gather ourselves and think about where they are. It seems like dribs and drabs of news have come in. Got an offensive lineman this week. Seems to settle on coaches. I just read it and know this. Toby just posted that Florida had a new strength and conditioning coach. Have you heard about that, guys? I haven't heard about it.
Yeah, I'm sure Graham can probably give you more on the guy, but he's been around since last year, right, Graham?
Yeah, Tyler Miles was a guy that, only 29 years old, I believe, maybe 28 years old, who really young in the business, but a player's coach. This is someone that when Craig Fitzgerald left, you had players going to Billy Napier within hours and saying, this is the guy you need to promote. Don't look elsewhere. And this is a critical window where you can't afford to have a 2-3 week, 1 month search, because it's January and February where you were looking to add, some continuity to your strength and development program. You don't want to bring someone else in. You want to maintain the same routine, and someone that is well liked, I think in today's day and age, has never been more critical with NIL and transfer portal, everything you want to talk about. That is something that I think coaches have to put a premium on. And Tyler Miles is a guy that spent time with Craig Fitzgerald in 2018 at Tennessee. He does a lot of the similar stuff, maybe has a few different wrinkles, but it's not going to change in the next, 10 days, 17 days, whatever you want to call it, before spring camp begins, which I think is the massive factor for Florida here. This is a hire made within 9 days of Craig Fitzgerald leaving. And I really told people that the big thing was that the hiring of Jake Sankel in late December made this less of an issue than it should have been, because Jake Sankel has been working with the strength and conditioning program every single day, as well as serving as the nutritionist. So having him in the building, I think, kind of eased some of the concerns about maybe a drop off in the routine, where they're still seeing a familiar face with the same strength training group. But Tyler Miles is a guy that, I know a lot of people talk about age and experience, and this is being a young guy, but we've seen guys who are, 2 decades into the business that don't work out here. We've seen guys who've been around for 40 years that don't work out. It is not so much about experience in my mind as just having the right techniques. You've seen it work out at other places, regardless of age, where guys are able to make a career out of themselves at 28, 29 years old, and Florida's hoping that Tyler Miles is able to do that.
All right, listen, let me get down to the brass tacks on something. I'm having an attitude adjustment for myself. And this week I sat and thought about, holy mackerel, look at the schedule. They've got Texas on November the 9th. Then I started remembering all the great teams they're going to be playing the schedule and lamenting the fact that they had to play this brutal back half of the schedule. But thinking at the same time, how neat is it going to be to go to Austin, Texas? If you haven't been there, and I have, it's a heck of a program. It's fun, and Gator fans will love it. From the standpoint of the schedule, yeah, it's tough, but for the fans, you've been wanting big games, you got some now. And they don't have that many powder puff games. I think Tennessee's got 3 or 4. One thing I like is Shane Matthews, I give him credit for this. He says, buddy, yes, it's a hard schedule, but what an opportunity. And if you look at it like that, say, you know what? What if? What if they did, in fact, go out and win some of those games? Now you made a statement real quick, and suddenly you begin to get some credibility. The problem is there's not a conviction by Gator fans or most people that they can do that. And I started thinking about, what is faith in Christian life or any religious? It's like faith is believing in something you can't see yet, right? That's kind of what they're going to have to go on this season, somewhat. DJ Legway's coming. They have their first 6 games, probably 4 or maybe 5 are winnable. I don't think any of the last 6 are winnable, but they can get off to a good start, get a little lucky here and there, and maybe get people kind of buzzed again. This Gator Nation needs a little buzz right now. So I don't know. I started thinking about it. You know what? I'm not trying to make up a warm fuzzy headline or be a sunshine up there. Am I wrong?
What do you think, Graham?
It's kind of similar to basketball in my mind, where you come off of a season where you went 5-2 in the first 7 games, but then the last 5 games you look. I don't want to say out of sorts, but you can see the difference in talent. And even if Florida ends up going 4-2, 5-1 in the first 6 games, I think people are going to want to see that they can compete in the final 6 games. And that's fair in my mind. I think absolutely you're going to want to see improvement. You're going to want to see more of a fight down the stretch. You're going to want to see more depth. And if they can do that, even if they lose a couple games in the first stretch by, 1 or 2 plays, less self-inflicted wounds, people I think are going to be more confident in the future of the program. But like you mentioned, buddy, you've already seen this thing set up where people can look at the schedule as being this absolute brutal gauntlet that no other team would trade their schedule for Florida's, right? And I think that you can use that all season long and say this is a real tough test to find players that want to compete. You can improve, iron sharpens iron. You have a chance to get guys in here who are going to want to compete against the best in the country rather than play a cupcake amount of opponents. That can, pay dividends on the recruiting trail and the transfer portal. Those are some of the intangible benefits I think that Florida can take from this season. If they manage to subvert expectations and go 7-5, 8-4, I think it absolutely will springboard this program into 2025 on the recruiting trail, the way that they just recruited off, a 5-7 season, 6-6 season, the first year under Napier. If they can recruit at a similar level, maximize the transfer portal, win a couple more games than people expect, and play some teams that we haven't seen too much, and Florida fans are into those games, whether it's at Texas, playing Miami. If you can beat Miami, if you can beat Florida State, who knows how things go for them up in Tallahassee as well this season. If you can win some games that people don't expect you to win and people are getting behind Napier, that is a win in my mind, even if you only go 6-6, 7-5, 5-7, whatever it is. The worst case scenario obviously is losing, more than 8 games next season, because then you are looking realistically at starting over from scratch, whether it's due to your roster, if they consider a coaching change, coordinator change, whatever it is. That would be, I think, worst case scenario. But if they can win 5 games or more, I know that's not what people in Gator Nation want to hear. They can absolutely continue to, gain forward momentum. And that is where the key lies for this program. But enjoy the absolute competition Florida's going to face, because I'll be honest, it's going to be tough to see a path over 8 wins for this team in my mind.
I agree with that. David?
Yeah, boy, 8 wins would be a cause for a ticker tape parade down University in 13th, at this point. But I think they need to, they need to take advantage of that first half of the schedule, because, if they could just get 4 wins going into that gauntlet, and then, as Graham said, if they could get a couple of wins towards the end, and that 5, 6, and those last 5 games, and be competitive. But if they go into that with just 3 wins, it's going to be tough, because, I've written, and I just don't see how, if it's still a losing season, that Billy's going to survive, just because, 4 straight losing seasons. I don't care how much faith that Scott Strickland may still have in him or whatnot. I just don't think you could sell that anymore. And so, they need to take advantage of that early schedule. It's not like that's easy by any means. It's just easier relative to what they have in the second half. But if they can't, you're right. And I think that's what Billy's going to preach, is that everybody's saying that, it's going to be killer. These are opportunities, and you can take advantage of them. And these, a lot of quad 1 wins out there, to put it in basketball parlance. They can, if they just are, win one, a couple of those towards into the season, and they have 4 or 5 wins, going into that, And I think a 7-win season, people would and they look good doing it, towards the end, and there's no blowouts like we I mean, let's face it, the last few years against Georgia and those teams, you're just hoping that that they're survivors on the field, and if they're competitive in those games and win a couple, I think it will bode well for the future. But man, this is the key year. One thing you didn't mention, that's nothing against some of these SEC towns, but you've been to one, you've been to a lot of them, because it's basically a small town with a great football atmosphere and all that. But Austin is a great trip, and that's one that fans should go in early and stay and bounce down to San Antonio. You'll be happy. It's only that's an hour south, and go up to Austin, and this is what makes college football great. And just like you said, the whole atmosphere, and things are bigger in Texas. Let me tell you, how that is, and it will be a great trip, a memorable trip, no matter what happens on the field for Florida fans.
I agree, and I wrote a column this week talking about Texas. I've always been a Texas admirer ever since I saw Darrell Royal speak in Gainesville. He got me so fired up I wanted to go out and walk on and play football for him. And the campus and the place and the school and the tradition. Of course, they had those great teams in '63 and '69, and they were a fun team to watch. So, and it's a neat school. I think it really is I think Austin's a terrific town. You guys have been out there, and I love their culture. I love their music. I love their food, and I think it's just a wonderful. It's a city of over 1 million people, not exactly a small city. So, what do you think, Graham? What are you going to do when you go to Austin? Where are you going to be going?
Hopefully, going to get some good barbecue. I think that kind of like going to Utah last year. I had never been farther west. Before Florida played in Las Vegas last year in the bowl game, I had never been farther west than Missouri. So I got to go out to Las Vegas last year, then got to go to Utah, 9 months later. That was fantastic. I've never been to Texas. When Florida played in 2017 in Dallas against Michigan, I had to stay back. I've been waiting to go to Texas for a long time. I'm looking forward to it. I've been to Dallas for a layover on a flight. That doesn't really count. So I'm looking forward to hopefully getting out there a day or two early, spending some good time out there. I would love to, down the line, go to Austin City Limits. I'm like you said, the music, it sounds like my type of place. Mm-hmm. I would love for it to happen. But, you hit the nail on the head. Enjoy the trip out there. If you can compete against a team that was one of the best in the nation last year, obviously, great coach, great roster, an all-time quarterback potentially, and Arch Manning. Obviously, they have probably the best 1-2 punch of quarterbacks in the nation. I think you could make that case. Great experience. If you can stay competitive in that game, enjoy a good football game, not be so invested in Florida winning that game. No offense, Florida fans. I would love to see an underdog pull that out on the road, but experience a trip that you haven't seen before. We're entering a new era of college football with 16 teams in the SEC, moving to this 5-7 playoff with 12 teams. Enjoy the trip out there. Get out there early. I may have to bring my golf clubs and find a course nearby because
there are a few.
This is what makes college football so great, is a chance to see places you haven't been before, and this is a year to do it.
Yeah, two gigantic brands there.
Yeah, I was going to say, and also, one thing that Gainesville and Austin have in common are bats, because Gainesville has the bat house where, every night at dusk, off they go, eat up 1 billion bugs in Central Florida. Boy, I tell you what, though, you have never seen bats like the ones in Austin, where at dusk they fly out from under the bridge over the river there. And it is, the sky turns black, there. But I think those are the two biggest bat colonies in America. And that's going to be something. Hey, there you go. There's an angle to pursue.
There's a column for David Whitley right there, if I ever saw it right there. Yeah, for sure. I don't know how far you go back with. Probably not as far as I do, but the great tradition of Texas, and of course Oklahoma's going to be interesting too. I'm sort of partial toward Texas. I like it, but Oklahoma's going to be a great trip. The great history, and someone mentioned last night we did the show, and they said that Oklahoma's one only school to have 5 coaches with 50 wins or something. I don't know. But anyway, Oklahoma, of course, Bobby Stoops, the history there. And David, we grew up, I did at least, in the days of Billy Vessels and all those guys in Oklahoma. And here's an interesting story. Darrell Royal, who did so well at Texas, was the Oklahoma quarterback for Bud Wilkinson. And you guys know who Bud Wilkinson was. He was the best coach in America for a long time until he became a TV commentator, and he was terrible. But so there's a lot of tradition there. So I was thinking, too, about the genealogy of football and the great teams. And back when I grew up, nobody ever cared much about the SEC. It was always Army, Navy, Ohio State. The SEC wasn't given much of a nod at all. And, of course, as we moved on through the 60s, and Texas and Arkansas began to make noise and get in there and stuff, then Alabama came into play. And the Alabama-Texas game in the 1965 Orange Bowl was one of the great ones. I happened to be there. First night game ever played. And Joe Namath was the quarterback. He's the guy who that night, on a Kempy leg, on 4th and 1 at the goal, Namath kept the ball, and he thought he got in, and they said he didn't. Tommy Novas knocked him back, and Texas beat Oklahoma. Texas beat Alabama in one of the great football games, and one that was, I think they had 18 players signed in the NFL out of that group. So Alabama took it over for a while, Arkansas and Texas. And the schools like Texas and Oklahoma, they're just big brands that I love to see them in the mix, and I love to see the team you're covering get a chance to be in that mix.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing that you talk about 60 years later, a game like that with Joe Namath. And, Novus may have gotten the better of him then, but I guarantee Joe had a better time on South Beach after the game, if nothing else.
For sure. Yeah. So, as a young guy like you, Graham, ought to be all fired up about covering Gator football here in the next couple of years and some of the venues you'll be visiting.
Yeah, it's like I said, a new era. I mean, if you had told me 5 years ago that we'd have name, image, and likeness, transfer portal, 16 teams in the SEC, a 12-team playoff, I would have told you, hey, I'll have what you're drinking. I would have absolutely kind of scoffed at that. It's not something I would have expected whatsoever, but we have a chance to cover teams we never would have dreamed of covering. We have a chance to go places we never would have thought of. It is, it's what makes it fun. And I think that I'm glad that you're highlighting the positives right now with college football, because I think there's a lot of complaining going on with this era of change, and a lot of it rightfully so. When you see a lot of transition, especially the amount of changes that we've seen in the past, half decade compared to the past 2 decades, it can certainly make you think that we've lost the game that people fell in love with. And I think that there's a lot still to appreciate. You're going to see competitions between teams that you've only dreamed of seeing, that you've only been able to fire up in a video game. You're able to see a chance to change the trajectory of your program on a year-to-year basis. And the phrase recruit every day and die has never been more applicable right now. There's a lot to love. You can fall really quickly in this sport just as quickly as you can rise. And we're now entering an era where Nick Saban has retired, and it seems a lot more of a free-for-all in a sense here, as dominant as Georgia has been, and as good as Texas is, and Oklahoma, of course. It seems more wide open than it has been in a couple of years. So I think there's a lot of excitement, and I think that certainly deserves to be highlighted in an era where, rightfully so, Florida fans have had a lot to complain about, but there is still a lot of excitement in this sport, and it's a great time to be following it.
Great time for football junkies, which is where we bring one in right now. Loren Meadows has been hiding back there in the orange and blue room. I didn't see him until just now. He's the guy who travels the country and takes in the sights and sounds, and he became a Florida fan and started traveling down from Dayton, and now he lives here. And the story, and say hello, Loren, to your colleagues here, Graham and David. I know you're fired up about going out to Texas. I'm sure you'll be there, right?
Yeah, that's the plan. Right now we're set to make the ride out there in November. It's going to be interesting. I think you'll know a lot about the Florida football team by then, like you guys were talking. Very winnable first half of the season where they could go, anywhere between 5-1 to 6-0 to 4-2. But it's going to be a telling. That back half is going to tell the story, and I think that you got to go out there and compete in those games. And the Texas game, I have a lot of eyes on it. Obviously, two of the premier recruiting bases in college football, and states that kind of go back and forth to who's got the best players coming out of there year in, year out. And it's going to be interesting because it's kind of 50-50 on what the Napier organization is gonna do in 2024, and it's still a lot of moving parts. So that game could be huge for a lot of reasons. Obviously, a big game for the SEC and realignment, but it's gonna be a thing. Definitely, and a lot of people will be heading out there, because it'll be the first trip out there for Florida, I think, ever. I mean, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, just a lot that goes into
Things
that
just,
game.
I think 1940 maybe, I believe.
I said just be a litmus test for the Gators for sure.
Yeah. Before you guys go, I want to kind of top it off by saying, give me your thoughts about the security of the head coach at Florida, how much that will play into the season. Two things happen. If you lose the confidence of the money people, you lose your NIL money. And then, of course, you start losing recruits. And when Billy already has kind of a cracked windshield, he's got some things to overcome. It would be nice to see him get out of the box and go 5-1 or whatever to get his mojo going. But how much is that going to be? I mean, that is scared money. That's the definition of scared money right there. Boy, he's got to play. What does he got to do? I'll start with Graham. What does he got to do besides obviously win games to right this ship? And how much does he have to do to prove he's the man for the job?
Well, I think if he recruits at the same levels he did last season, I think he's going to give himself a really good chance that if they win 5-6 games this season, given the gauntlet, that he's going to be here in 2025. I know that a lot of people think that if they don't win 6-7 games, then he's a dead man walking. I don't believe that whatsoever. I think if they can bring in a top 6, top 7 recruiting class, in this era where NIL is a factor, I think that people may need to realize that a head coach's security is less tied to a recruiting class sticking together than maybe it ever has been. When NIL is a factor, you have a chance to really retain a majority of your signees and recruits and transfers, even if the head coach's job is a little bit unstable, because obviously there's another factor there. I think if he can bring some players in and recruit at a high rate where, depending on how they do during the season, it's not so much of a risk at falling apart. That'll certainly play a factor whatsoever. But I think that this is a more complex situation than how Florida just does in the 60 minutes of football, given the situation with how the athletic department is set up. I think that Billy Napier may have a little bit of a quote unquote longer leash than some people want to believe. And depending on how you look at that, that could rub Florida fans the wrong way. But I do think that you can rest assured that a lot of Billy Napier's future is not going to be dictated by the 12 games of the regular season. So if they can be competitive, like David said, and go into some games and win some games down the stretch and recruit at a high rate and use the transfer portal well and utilize DJ Lagway and the current freshmen pay off and you see improvement from the underclassmen, all these things, I think Billy Napier comes back for year 4. Obviously, a lot can be determined in that time span, but I don't really buy the narrative that his tenure at Florida is going to be decided by this upcoming schedule, because if that was the case, I think we would have maybe had some more contingency plans in place already being made. And from everything I've heard, this is a program that expects to have him back in 2025 if they continue improving in the direction that they have.
Maybe not a dead man walking. Real quick comment about, I want to tell you about MRI, tight MRI, and then we'll hear David's thoughts about that, whether he's a dead man walking, and then, of course, Loren. I want you to know out there that Titan MRI is now open, serving the greater Gainesville, North Florida central area, focused on you, the patient, having great customer service. And they know most people lead a busy life, although they have regular business hours. They're open, available for appointment by evenings and weekends to meet your schedule. In order to meet, you can work out your medical time within the context of your life. Our MRI equipment is modern, and the MRI unit has one of the largest bores openings of any of the newer high-strength MRI units. It allows comfortable scanning for potential claustrophobic people and larger patients who generally cannot tolerate smaller closed units. So check them out. Go to Titan MRI. You can make an appointment. You can same-day service, cash or card accepted. No insurance, no problem. TitanMRI.com. David, dead man walking?
Oh no, not yet. Because the season hasn't begun yet. Let's say he's a sick man walking. He's got a big a hacking cough after a couple of years, but there's still time for it to clear up if we want to take the metaphor far. But I mean his job status it looms over everything, and it's sort of like you can see the first game, the angle coming in, Cristobal and versus Napier. They're in the same situation. Two guys who brought in much hoopla, a lot of money, seen as the guys who will write these programs, and both the jury is still out on both of them. And whoever loses that, immediately they're going to be labeled that one was that school made the wrong choice. So I think winning, he needs to have as Lauren said, get 4 to 5 wins. If he can go into that second half of 4 or 5 wins, it gives him a room for error. And then just win a couple of those. I mean, imagine if you beat Texas out there, or beat LSU, or imagine beating Georgia. Then he's a made man at that point. So they certainly have the opportunity. He doesn't have to win all the games, but if he can just win a couple of those games, I think that will give him the grace period that he needs still with those people that you talk about. Because I think that Scott Strickland still believes in him, but he does have to listen to people who aren't quite as patient, and they want to see W's, right? They're tired of seeing of losing seasons, and so I do think it's a key that there are a larger number on the left side of the ledger than the right side of the ledger when the season is over, But in a lot of but it's also how they play those last few games. They can't just fall apart. They're down the end. They need to be competitive. If they can win a couple of those, then I think the momentum is there, and he can survive if it looks set. But one thing they won't have to worry about is the great expectations. Letting people down, because I think the bar is set so low. They go out there and have 7 or 8 wins. Seem like okay, we can see that the old it's trending now. We'll be trending up if they can do that. So I think he likes all the he should like all this doom and gloom that people are saying. Oh yeah, they'd be lucky to win 5 games. Because I think it serves his purpose well, and it makes him hey, if people expect you to go out there and be lucky to win 5 and you win 7, it's like hey, you did a great job. So he probably wants us to come out and all of us need to predict 2 and 10, and he'll probably come shake our hands after.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so I know you guys want to go, but I want to get Lauren's thoughts real quick. He has a little different view. I think his leash might be a little shorter on Billy. Give us your 60-second comment, and then Lauren, you and I will stay here and talk a little women's hoops after these guys go to bed. Lauren, your thoughts? Short leash for Billy?
I mean, as critical as I've been, I don't think he's dead man walking. I mean, my criticism just comes from the fact that it's too many negatives. I mean, the on-field play, some of the secrecy, the kind of closed-in mentality that Billy Napier's kind of take on, and I think frustrates some of our colleagues after games and things like that, where just you haven't been able to really get inside and in some ways even get to know him and be able to defend some of the decisions, things like that. But I mean, if you look at, I've said it on this show a million times, you got a quarterback, you got a chance. And I think that Graham Mertz is one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the SEC, if not the country. And so with that said, I think they could be a good football team and get 6 to 7 wins, and like David said, appease some people there. So I'm not necessarily in the fire Billy Napier camp, but things really have to get better. And in-game situations, end-of-game situations, just those head scratchers where we're sitting down on the field last 5 minutes of game, and guys are going to press conference looking at each other like, what did we just see? And it's got to look like something, and that's the biggest thing. And I think if they can figure out a way to get off the field on 4th and 17 and get the field goal unit on at the right time, and instead of kind of bumbling this thing, then they could be in good shape, because there are some winnable games even on that back half that if they do what they're supposed to do, they could be in the game. So I'm kind of in wait and see mode. I think the biggest thing for Billy Napier right now is that the University of Florida is kind of in a mode where they want to stop the revolving door of football coaches. I think that's his biggest asset, is at this point in time, they don't want to keep paying buyouts and things like that. So I would even venture to say he is at least safe, I think, into 2025 and maybe even into 2026, just because if you look at the patience that other universities have shown, it could be a cautionary tale for Florida to not make a move too soon. So,
all right, good stuff. All right, Loren, thank you very much. And all right, Graham, it's good to have you back on again. Good stuff tonight. Any final thoughts?
Just good to be back. Looking forward to this great window here in March where we have baseball, basketball, looking like, knock on wood, and the NCAA tournament and spring camp. It's going to be a really good time.
All right, Graham Hall, 247 Sports. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. All right, David Whitley, your thoughts, final thoughts before we let you go to bed and have your milk and cookies?
Man, we never got around to talking golf, did we?
Well, go ahead. No. Did you see Matsuyama's round of 62 at Riviera?
Yeah.
Oh, phenomenal.
Yeah. I was quite around, although, it's funny. When all said and done, the biggest news of the weekend was Tiger getting the flu.
Yeah. Well, that and Jordan Spieth not signing an incorrect scorecard.
Right.
So
right. What's the classic line? What a dummy I am.
Yeah, that was
Yeah. You wonder, as many rounds as he's played, as many scorecards, you go, how does that still happen? But it just goes to show you.
Yeah. Sound like something a sports writer would do. Anyway. All right, David. Good stuff, man. Appreciate you. Don't forget to read David in the Gainesville Sun, and I'll post all the posts out there where his column appears around the world.
Adios.
Thank you, David. Well, Loren, I want you to hang around for a minute because I know you've been studying the women's basketball pretty good, and keep it up. You got track and field starting soon. You're pretty positive about Kellyanne's team. Hit a couple of bumps in the road. What's the status of women's basketball right now?
Man, it's unfortunate because you look at the team as it's constructed and just the way that Kelly Ray has kind of constructed the team and continues to recruit. I think they have a tournament team. I don't think they're going to make the tournament. If they can hang on and have a winning record, they'll go to the NIT, and that'll be 3 years straight of postseason play. And I think that hadn't been done since the mid-'90s. So, I mean, it's one of those things where it's the only program in the SEC that's never won, program in Florida that's never won the SEC, and it's a build. I mean, as people want to call Billy Napier's situation a rebuild, this truly is a rebuild from kind of the unfortunate circumstances that Kelly Ray kind of ascended to the job, and then being able to steady that program and make it her own. But if you look at the way she's been able to recruit with being able to get Liv McGill and Miara O'Neal coming in next year. And, they brought in Layla Reynolds, who was McDonald's All-American this season. So she's 3 for 3 on McDonald's All-Americans. And, I think it's one of those things where Florida, I think eventually, if they hang in with Kelly Ray, I think they can get to the point where they're in the top half of the SEC consistently year in, year out. And in women's basketball, with how good the SEC is, I mean, you're probably in the top 15, top 20 every season, and I think they're headed in that direction. What has happened is they really don't have a true point guard. They kind of have a shooting guard, moonlighting as a point guard, and that's with all due respect with Aaliyah Matharu because she can really fill it up. But next year they'll have a true point guard. They'll be talented in some wing positions. They bring some people back. So I mean, it's one of those things where it's going to take time, but they are competitive in enough basketball games. I mean, really, they've really been blown out in 2 games: the LSU game and the South Carolina game. It's just learning to win and walk into every game, being able to put their foot on people's throat. And that's where I think that, as they grow as a basketball team, they're learning things that will kind of show themselves in the next couple seasons, hopefully. But it's one of it's kind of the forgotten program at times, and Kelly with the unlaced, and kind of opening up a program to people is kind of making an attempt to make them relevant. Obviously the big win they had on national TV in the Jordan Brand Classic. And, the SEC network seems to like Florida as well. So they're at least prominent, on the weekends and things like that. But they probably left about 6 wins on the table. And unfortunately, those will be the 6 wins that'll keep them from probably in March.
Coach Loren Meadows, great stuff as always, Coach. Sorry I didn't see you earlier tonight. You were hiding in the corner down there, and good to have you back on. Hope you're doing well. And look forward to having you on Thursday night for our Orange and Blue Blood show. So great stuff, man.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it. Loren Meadows. All right, folks, I want to tell you about one of our fine sponsors before we go off the air tonight. That would be Renstar Medical Research. Clinical trials exist to bring new therapies to the public safely. And clinical trials would not exist without the commitments of the volunteers. If you would decide to participate in Renstar, you may receive study-related medications and procedures at no charge to you or your insurance. You may also gain access to new investigational medications or devices that are not otherwise available and receive compensation for your time and travel. As a research site, Renstar Medical Research is dedicated to bringing new opportunities to participants in medical science in our local community. And an important part of that commitment is helping you to answer your questions about volunteering for a clinical trial. Please explore the FAQ section of our website, renstar.net, for answers to many of the questions you may have. And of course, please feel free to call or talk to us about how you can make a difference in your research. See our currently enrolling trials, and please contact Renstar today. Renstar, seeking tomorrow's answers to the health questions of today. Thank you to our guests tonight, David Whitley, Loren Meadows, and Graham Hall, all making the show very good tonight. Hope you enjoyed it. We're back tomorrow night with our Sweet and Sour. David Moulton and Allie Wilbur, Pete, will be with us. So check us out. Meanwhile, don't forget to watch my friend Rob Brown every morning on the SEC sidelines. Have a great night, and we'll see you on the other side.